Susan Patron was born March 18, 1948, near Los Angeles, California. She grew up and attended public schools in Hollywood. She grew up a middle sister of 3. Georgia's her younger sister, then Susan, and Patricia's her older sister. Susan grew up a very shy child and discovered that when you write, you can take all the time you need to get the exact words and to put them in a precise order so that they mean what you want them to mean. Susan, George, and Patricia had many adventures growing up. Some of their adventures were inspirations for characters and situations in Susan's books. Susan remembers the exact moment when she decided to become a writer. Her 4th grade teacher had just finished reading Charlotte's Web aloud to the class. She was leaning her head on her arm, and by peeking to the side, she could see that a lot of other people had their heads down too. It was a very private and personal moment when you hear about Charlotte's death. She didn't want anyone to see her face, but at the same time, she felt a connection to the teacher and the other kids, and especially to the author, E.B. White. It was an experience she had never experienced before. The book was both intimate and universal, and she wanted to be able to do this, to write so powerfully that people stop everything and are quiet because of the stories filling them up inside. As Susan made it known to her parents that she wanted to become a writer, her parents didn't discourage her, but suggested it might be wise to study for a job that might actually pay the rent, so becoming a librarian seemed logical. Susan had a wonderful plan to live in a maid's room in Paris, writing novels under pseudonym so as to reveal all the truths without her parents ever knowing it was her. After college, Susan thought maybe she could do both, be a librarian and a writer. She'd have books and reading right in the center of her life. As it turned out, she married a young French rare book restorer who would also have books at the center of his life, and together they would discover the beautiful Eastern Sierra region of California, the setting for the stories about Lucky and her town of Hardpan. Susan and her Frenchman husband, René, often went to a Los Feliz bookstore on dates. René became her husband and encouraged her to write, and was not discouraged by the rejection slips she got in the mail after submitting her first manuscripts. She and René have no children of their own, but Patron has connected with thousands of youngsters, many of whom write to her as though she were a family member. Miss Susan Patron began working as a children's librarian at the Los Angeles Public Library in 1972. She worked as a specialist in the children's literature for nearly 35 years. Her deep immersion in the field included service on some book award committees, the Caldecot and the Laura Ingalls Wilder Committees of the American Library Association, the Patricia Beatty Committee of the California Library Association, and Penn Literary Award Committee. As a senior librarian, she told stories, visited schools, and shared her favorite books with kids. And she began to write books herself, spending all her vacation time and weekends learning how to tell stories on paper. This is a little cabin in the desert where she tries to find the exact words she needs and arranges them so they mean exactly what she wants them to mean. She often finds that in the end, it's a complete surprise. She ends up writing what she didn't know she already knew. The Higher Power of Lucky is a 2007 Caldecot Award. This is a complex story with a lot of backstory, but Patron makes her characters charming. The young characters seem to be older, but they are all dealing with unusual conditions, forcing them to accept the harshness of life earlier than most. Lucky's best friend Lincoln Clinton Carter Kennedy has a knot-tying fetish, and 5-year-old Miles, who lives down the street, is an orphan addicted to cookies. And Lucky has not yet come to terms with the death of her mother or abandonment by her father. The unlikely trio form a bond that will amaze the reader and prove the value of friendship. The story is of a 10-year-old Lucky who has lost her mom and was abandoned by her dad. She lives in Hardpan, California, population 43. She is the ward of a beautiful French woman. Worried that she'll be sent to a foster home, Lucky eavesdrops on 12-step meetings in an effort to find her higher power. book indeed won the Newbery Award, but also made news for another reason. Mrs. Patron used the word scrotum on the first page of the story, where a rattlesnake bites a dog in a sensitive spot. Some librarians have refused to stock the book. This news reached Miss Patron in her home in Los Angeles. She said she was stunned by the objections. The story of the rattlesnake bite was based on a true incident involving a friend's dog. Mr. Maurice Sudnick said, "Bravo for the lady who put it on the front page." In an interview, Miss Susan Patron was asked what inspired the idea for the higher power of Lucky. Her response: "It took over 10 years to write the book, and a lot of my own life experiences played into it. For instance, my mother died in 2003, which made me realize, I hadn't known this before, that Lucky had lost her mother and was longing for her. Also, my husband and I spent a lot of time in California's Eastern Sierra area, which became the setting for the story and strongly affected its events." The higher power Lucky received several awards, including the Newbery Award in 2007, the Focal Award for a book that enhances a child's understanding of California, the American Library Association Notable Book 2007 Award, and the Junior Literary Guild Selection Award. This book has also been translated into Hebrew, French, Spanish, Japanese, Thai, Chinese, Arabic, Turkish, and Indonesian. Lucky Breaks is a sequel to The Higher Power of Lucky. Having reached the mature age of 11 in the tiny California town of Hardpan, population 43, Lucky discovers there's still much to learn about friendship, parental trust, and the Milky Way galaxy. Miss Susan Patron recalls as a grown-up in the early 1990s when her sister casually recounted their old bathtub stories family saga to the editor of her picture books. He turned to me and said, "Go write that. It's a book, a novel, not a picture book." So I tricked myself into doing it by setting down the story as if I were an oral tale, like my picture books, as if it came from the folk tradition and I was just doing a modern retelling of stuff I knew. This turns out to be her book. Maybe yes, maybe no, maybe maybe. The storyline for Maybe Yes, Maybe No, Maybe Maybe is when her hard-working mother decides to move. 8-year-old PK uses her imagination and storytelling to help her older and younger sisters adjust. This brought on the awards of the Kirkus Pointered Review, the Publisher's Weekly Starred Review, the School Library Journal Starred Review, the School Library Journal Best Books of 1993, the Parenting Magazine's Certificate of Excellence for Distinguished Achievement in Children's Literature Best Books of 1993, the New York Public Library Children's Books 1993, the American Library Association Notable Book 1994 Award, and the Cooperative Children's Book Center Choices the 1993 Award. Bobbin Dust Dobbin lives in the dust under Billy Q's bed, fears for her safety when 5 bad boys propose to sweep out Billy's house in honor of his birthday. Awards and distinctions for this book are as follows: the School Library Journal Starred Review, the Reviewed in New York Times Book Review, and the Horn Book Guide No. 2 rating. 5 Bad Boys, Billy Q, and the Dust Dobbin. The dust dobbin under his bed shrinks Billy Q down to its size to teach him what it's like to be small, and he must get freely offered gifts from 5 stubborn boys before regaining his normal size. The awards and distinctions for this book were the Kirkus Pointered Review, the School Library Journal Starred Review, the Horn Book Guide No. 2 rating, and it was also featured on PBS Storytime, read by Tom Selleck. Burgoo stew is a variant of stone soup. Old Billy Q tames a group of rough, hungry boys. The awards and distinctions for this book were the Reviewer's Choice Best of 1991 Sesame Street Magazine Parents Guide, the Kirkus Pointered Review, the Horn Book Guide No. 2 rating, and it was also published in Braille in the anthology Expectations by the Braille Institute. Miss Susan Patron has retired after 35 years at the Los Angeles Public Library. but she has retired to write full-time. She retired the same year that she won the Newbery Medal Award. Quote, "I loved my work, and leaving the Los Angeles Public Library was truly wrenching. Then a week later, I began connecting with children, hundreds of them, on a West Coast train tour of bookstores and libraries. The kids were great, and I realized that essentially I hadn't shed my librarian skin. I'm still talking books, libraries, and reading." End quote. Miss Susan Patron currently lives in Los Angeles, California, and still married to her love, Renee Patron. Mrs. Patron is working on the final book in the Lucky trilogy. I look forward to reading it.